The night it all began felt like any other. I'd just finished replacing the burnt-out light bulb in the kitchen, grumbling to myself about Emily forgetting to pick up the groceries. Again, it wasn't unusual for her to forget things lately, but I figured life had just gotten hectic for both of us. Or maybe I was just making excuses for her. The next morning, I was scrolling through my email while sipping my coffee, hoping to knock out a few work tasks before the chaos of the day began. Among the endless stream of promotions and spam, there was a message with the subject line, "You should know." No sender name, no details, just 2 words, Curiosity 1, and I clicked it. The email contained a single attachment, a video. My stomach twisted as I hovered over the play button. Some instinct told me this was no ordinary spam. The video opened to a grainy recording of a dimly lit restaurant. The camera seemed hidden, tucked into a corner. At first, it was hard to make out anything beyond the faint hum of voices and clinking glasses. But then I saw her, Emily. She was sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize, a clean-cut guy in a navy blazer who leaned in far too close. Her face, the one I'd kissed goodnight every evening for years, was glowing with an expression I hadn't seen in months. Not for me, anyway. Then, like a slap across the face, I watched her laugh. She reached out, touched his hand, and lingered. The intimacy of the gesture hit me harder than I thought possible. She didn't pull away. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at a blank screen, heart pounding in my chest. I rewatched it 3 times, searching for some explanation, some sign that it wasn't what it seemed. But there was no mistaking the look in her eyes. She was happy, more than happy. By the time Emily came downstairs, still in her pajamas, I'd already made up my mind. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. She paused mid-step, her expression a mix of confusion and annoyance. "What are you talking about?" I held up my phone. The video paused at the moment her hand brushed his. Her face drained of color, but to her credit, or maybe her audacity, she recovered quickly. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice sharp now. "Answer the question, Emily." Instead of answering, she grabbed the coffee pot and started pouring herself a cup. Like this was some minor inconvenience rather than the implosion of our marriage. "It's not what it looks like," she finally said, her tone exasperated. "Don't insult me." My hands were trembling, but I kept my voice steady. "You don't laugh like that with me anymore. You don't touch me like that. So, don't stand there and tell me it's nothing." She turned to face me, cup in hand, and shrugged. "Fine," she said. "His name is Josh. We've had dinner a few times for work. That's it. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Work? You touched his hand for work?" I could feel my anger boiling over, threatening to spill out in ways I'd regret. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped, slamming the cup onto the counter. "It's always about you, isn't it? Your insecurities, your paranoia. God, Ryan. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of your precious job, I wouldn't need someone else to make me feel alive." Her words hit like a freight train, but instead of feeling crushed, something in me snapped. "That's your excuse?" I said, my voice colder than I thought possible. "You want to feel alive, so you go and laugh with him? Touch him? Lie to me?" She rolled her eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Oh, grow up, Ryan. Not everything is about betrayal and drama. Sometimes people just need something different." My jaw tightened, my vision blurring with rage and disbelief. But I didn't say anything. Couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I left the room, her dismissive scoff echoing behind me. Little did she know, this was just the beginning, that I didn't leave the house that morning because I needed air. I left because I didn't trust myself to keep calm. Emily's words replayed in my head like a broken record. Sometimes people just need something different. I parked my car at the nearby overlook, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding, not from anger anymore, but from something darker. Fear. Fear that she didn't feel guilty. Fear that she wasn't even trying to hide it. And worst of all, fear that I was about to discover just how far her lies went. After what felt like hours, I made a decision. If she wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. When I got home, Emily was gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and there was a note on the counter. Dinner meeting. Don't wait up. It was all I needed. I headed straight for her home office. It was a small, meticulously organized space that she used to store everything. Her laptop, files, mail, receipts. She once joked that if she ever went missing, the entire story of her life could be pieced together in that room. Funny how that thought didn't feel so far-fetched now. I started with her laptop. The password was the same as always, our anniversary. That stung. Did she feel no shame, using a date meant to symbolize us to lock away whatever secrets she was keeping? Her inbox didn't show anything unusual, just work emails and promotional offers. But then I noticed a folder labeled Personal. It wasn't locked, which made it feel almost like an invitation. Inside, I found an email thread that made my blood run cold. The subject line, "Missed you already, the sender, Josh Wheeler." I opened the latest email, dated just 2 nights ago. "Emily, last night was incredible. Every time I see you, I feel like the luckiest guy alive. Let's do it again soon. I'll book the same place, it feels like our spot now. Yours, Jay." I sat there, staring at the screen, the words blurring together. Our spot. The spot. Like it was sacred to them. I scrolled down the thread, reading their exchanges. They joked. They flirted. They reminisced about nights I hadn't even realized she was gone. She wasn't just lying to me. She was building an entire world with him. That wasn't the only thing I found. There were photos. Selfies of the two of them at restaurants, walking through parks, sitting in a car. In every picture, she looked radiant, smiling with an ease I hadn't seen in years. The worst was a video. I almost didn't watch it, but morbid curiosity won. In it, Emily was in a hotel room. She was laughing, holding a glass of wine, as Josh leaned in and kissed her neck. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling. There was no longer any doubt. No more "it's just work" excuses. She wasn't just betraying me. She was reveling in it. When she came home that night, I was waiting for her in the living room. She walked in, heels clicking against the floor, looking every bit the polished, professional woman she presented to the world. "How was your meeting?" I asked, my tone neutral. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Fine." "Why?" "No reason," I said, standing and walking toward her. "Just thought I'd ask. Considering you didn't think it was worth inviting me to your spot with Josh." Her face froze. For a split second, I saw panic in her eyes. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a defiant glare. "You went through my things," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You lied to my face." I shot back, repeatedly. "Don't act like I'm the villain here. You don't understand," she started. But I cut her off. "No, Emily, you don't understand. I trusted you. I believed you. And this?" I gestured wildly toward the laptop I'd left open on the coffee table, her emails and photos still displayed. "This is what you were doing while I was home, wondering why you'd grown so distant?" She crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been sneaking around with him for God knows how long, and you didn't want to hurt me? That's rich." "You don't get it, Ryan," she snapped, her voice rising. "Do you even know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage? To feel like nothing you do matters anymore?" "Invisible," I barked. "I've been here, Emily, every day, supporting you, loving you, trusting you. You're the one who checked out, not me." Her lips curled into a smirk, a mocking one that sent a chill down my spine. "Well, maybe if you'd been a little more exciting, I wouldn't have needed someone else to fill the void." I stared at her, stunned into silence. She was unapologetic, defiant, even smug. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing the version of her I thought I knew. The silence that followed her words was suffocating. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes with peace or resolution. It was the kind that lingers after a bomb goes off, when your ears ring and the world feels broken. Emily brushed past me, her perfume lingering in the air like a taunt. She kicked off her heels, letting them clatter carelessly onto the floor, and walked into the kitchen. "You're not even sorry, are you?" I said, following her. My voice was low, but it carried an edge sharp enough to cut through steel. She opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of wine. "You want me to grovel?" Beg for forgiveness? Let's not kid ourselves, Ryan. This marriage has been circling the drain for years. Her nonchalance made my chest tighten. Circling the drain? I repeated, my voice rising. That's your excuse? You didn't even try to fix it. You just ran to someone else like a coward. She poured herself a glass of wine, swirling it like we were in the middle of a casual conversation. Do you even hear yourself? She said, taking a sip. You're so dramatic. Not everything is black and white. No, Emily. It's pretty black and white when you're sneaking around with another man. I slammed my hand on the counter, my frustration boiling over. How long has this been going on? She sighed, as if my question bored her. Does it really matter? Yes, it matters, I shouted. I deserve to know the truth. She set her glass down and finally looked at me, her eyes cold and calculating. Fine. You want the truth? It's been 6 months. Happy now. 6 months. Half a year. While I'd been going about my life, clueless and trusting, she'd been living a double life. I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. 6 months. God, Emily, how did we even get here? Her face softened for a moment, just a flicker of the woman I used to know. But then, just as quickly, it hardened again. We got here because you stopped paying attention to me. You buried yourself in work, in your hobbies, in everything but me. Josh, he sees me. He listens. He makes me feel alive. Alive? I spat. You mean sneaking around and lying to your husband makes you feel alive? She shrugged, picking up her glass again. Maybe it does. I stared at her, my blood boiling. You're unbelievable. Do you even care about what this is doing to me? To us? She rolled her eyes, that same infuriating smirk tugging at her lips. Oh, please, you'll get over it. Men like you always do. That was it. The last straw. Men like me? I asked, my voice shaking with barely restrained fury. You mean the kind who gave you everything? The kind who trusted you, who believed in you, who loved you even when you didn't deserve it? Is that what you mean? She didn't answer. She just sipped her wine, watching me like she was waiting for me to burn out. But I wasn't burning out. I was just getting started. You know what, Emily? If you think Josh is such a prize, go to him. Pack your bags and leave. I'm done fighting for someone who clearly doesn't give a damn about me. For the first time that night, her composure cracked. Her eyes widened, and her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. You don't mean that, she said finally, her voice quieter now. Oh, I do, I said, my tone colder than I thought I was capable of. I mean every word. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, might try to salvage what was left of our shattered marriage. But instead, she picked up her glass, drained it, and set it down with a finality that made my heart ache. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with defiance. Maybe I will. And with that, she walked upstairs, leaving me standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of what used to be my life. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. Because while she might have thought she held all the cards, she didn't know what I'd found earlier that day. She didn't know that I had more than just emails and photos. She didn't know I'd found his address, and I wasn't going to let this end without answers. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Emily moving around upstairs. Her footsteps were brisk, purposeful, like she had somewhere to be. For once, I didn't care where. The second she walked out the door, slamming it behind her, I grabbed my keys and left too. Josh Wheeler. I'd stared at his name and address all night, memorizing every detail like it was some sacred mantra. I didn't know what I'd say or what I'd do, but I couldn't let this go. I needed to see him, to look the man who was destroying my life in the eye. The drive to his house felt endless, my mind cycling through every possible outcome. Would he deny it? Would he laugh in my face? Would he even answer the door? When I finally pulled up, I almost laughed. His house was picture perfect, the kind you'd see in a glossy magazine. White picket fence, neatly trimmed lawn, flowers lining the walkway. It was sickening. I parked on the curb and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Then, with a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked to his door. My heart was pounding as I knocked, the sound echoing in the quiet suburban street. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened and there he was. Josh Wheeler. He was exactly what I expected. Tall, well-dressed, with that polished, effortless charm that made people trust him instantly. He looked at me with a mix of confusion and curiosity, clearly trying to place who I was. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite but cautious. I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to keep my anger in check. "You're Josh Wheeler," I said finally. His brow furrowed slightly. "I am. Do I know you?" "No," I said, my voice cold. "But you know my wife, Emily." Recognition flashed across his face, but he masked it quickly, stepping back slightly as if to create more distance. "Look, I don't know what you think. Don't lie to me," I snapped, cutting him off. "I've seen the emails, the pictures, the video." That made him pause. His polished facade cracked just enough for me to see the guilt underneath. "Ryan, right?" he said, his voice softer now. "Listen, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean for it to happen? You've been sneaking around with my wife for 6 months. That doesn't just happen." He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "It's complicated. Complicated," I repeated, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea what this has done to me? To my life?" "I'm sorry," he said, and for a moment, I almost believed him. But then he added, "Emily told me things were difficult between you two." I thought. "You thought what?" I interrupted. "That you'd swoop in and save her? That I'd just roll over and let you take her?" Josh held up his hands, as if trying to calm me down. "Look, man, I'm not trying to fight you. I understand why you're upset, but Emily's an adult. She made her own choices." His words hit me like a slap. Of course she had. But hearing it from him, the man she'd chosen over me, made it feel like he'd ripped my chest open and poured salt directly onto my heart. "You're a real piece of work. You know that?" I said, stepping closer. "You wreck someone's life and then act like it's no big deal?" Josh took a step back, his expression wary now. "I get that you're angry, but this isn't going to solve anything. Maybe you should talk to Emily instead of coming here and trying to intimidate me." His calm, condescending tone was the final straw. I felt my hands balling into fists, the urge to hit him almost overwhelming. But I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that wasn't the answer. Instead, I turned and walked away, my chest heaving with unspent rage. "Ryan," he called after me. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. I didn't mean to hurt anyone." I didn't look back. When I got to my car, I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. I thought confronting him would give me some kind of closure, but all it had done was pour gasoline on the fire. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. "We need to talk. Can you come home?" Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep driving and never look back. But another part of me, the part that still wanted answers, turned the car around. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When I got home, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked different. Tired, worn down, as if she hadn't slept in days. But the moment her eyes met mine, the defiance I'd grown used to seeing was gone. "I'm surprised you came back," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "You said we needed to talk," I replied, keeping my tone even. "So talk." She nodded, taking a long sip of her wine before setting the glass down. Her fingers traced the rim absently, as though she were trying to find the right words. "I've been lying to you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," I said coldly, leaning against the counter. "You've been lying to me for 6 months." Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "You went through my things? Don't even try to make me the villain here." I shot back. "I know about Josh. I know about the dinners, the emails, the hotel rooms. You've been cheating on me, Emily. So, don't waste your breath trying to shift the blame." She flinched, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and let out a long, shaky breath. "You have no idea how hard it's been for me." "Oh, please," I scoffed. "Spare me the sob story. You're not the victim here." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly composed herself. "Ryan, I'm not making excuses. I need you to understand. Understand what? I demanded. That you decided our marriage wasn't good enough for you? That you thought it was okay to sneak around with someone else instead of talking to me? It wasn't like that, she said, her voice trembling. It wasn't planned. I didn't wake up one day and decide to cheat on you. It just happened. I laughed bitterly. That's the second time I've heard that today. Must be the cheater's motto. Her face twisted with guilt, but she pushed on. Ryan, I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you, but I felt so empty for years, like we were just going through the motions. I needed something, someone, to make me feel alive again. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. And you thought Josh would fill that void? You thought destroying our marriage was the solution. I didn't destroy it, she said, her voice rising. It was already broken. We were broken. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. So what? Instead of fixing it, you decided to light it on fire. She looked away, her hands trembling. I didn't know what else to do, she admitted. Josh, he was just there. He made me feel wanted, needed. And I didn't? I asked, my voice breaking. After everything we've been through, you didn't feel wanted or needed by me? She didn't answer. The silence was deafening. I took a step closer, my anger giving way to something else. Something colder. You know what, Emily? Maybe you're right. Maybe we were broken. But instead of fighting for us, you chose the easy way out. You chose him. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I didn't care. I was done being the only one who cared. Do you love him? I asked suddenly, the question hanging in the air like a weight. Her eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. No, it wasn't about love. It was, I don't know, it was a mistake. A 6-month mistake? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You don't get to call it that, Emily. You don't get to downplay what you've done. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. What do you want me to say, Ryan? That I'm a terrible person? That I don't deserve forgiveness? Fine, I'll say it. I screwed up. I ruined everything. But I didn't do it because I don't care about you. I did it because I didn't know how to fix us. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of the woman I'd fallen in love with. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But it wasn't enough. Do you want to fix us now? I asked, my tone deadly serious. She hesitated, and in that moment, I knew the truth. I don't know, she admitted finally, her voice barely audible. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. After everything, she didn't even know if she wanted to save us. Then there's nothing left to say, I said, turning toward the door. Ryan, wait, she called after me, her voice desperate. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'll give you one chance, Emily, I said, my voice cold and steady. If you want to fix this, if you really want to fix this, you need to decide. Him or me. And you need to decide now. The silence that followed was unbearable. And then she said the words that shattered whatever hope I had left. I need time. I nodded, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Take all the time you need, I said, walking out the door. But don't expect me to be waiting when you figure it out. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief, and everything in between. I stayed at a motel on the edge of town, unable to face the house that now felt like a mausoleum for my marriage. Emily didn't call. She didn't text. Nothing. At first, I was furious. How could she stay silent after everything that had happened? But as the silence stretched on, my anger morphed into something more painful. The realization that she might not choose me at all. I tried to distract myself. Work, gym, long drives, but nothing filled the void. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying our fight over and over in my head. Her words haunted me. I need time. Time for what? To decide if I was worth saving? On the 4th night, just as I was about to give up and attempt sleep, my phone buzzed. For a moment, I thought it was Emily. But when I checked the screen, the name that popped up made my blood run cold. It was Josh. My first instinct was to ignore it. But something about the timing felt deliberate, almost calculated. Against my better judgment, I answered, What do you want? I said, my voice icy. There was a pause on the other end before Josh spoke, his tone unusually subdued. Ryan, we need to talk. I laughed bitterly. We already talked, remember? You made your choices. What else is there to say? This isn't about that, he said, his voice unsteady. It's about Emily. Hearing her name from his mouth was enough to make my jaw clench. What about her? She came to see me earlier today, he said, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. But something's wrong. She wasn't herself. I gripped the phone tighter, my chest tightening. What do you mean, not herself? She was upset, crying. She said she'd made a mistake and that she needed to figure things out. I thought you'd want to know. My head spun. Emily crying? Telling Josh she'd made a mistake? None of it made sense. What else did she say? I demanded. Not much, Josh admitted. She left in a hurry. But the way she was acting, I think you should check on her. Why the hell do you care? I snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. Because I don't want this to get worse than it already is, he said, his voice heavy with guilt. Whatever else you think of me, Ryan, I didn't want this to happen. I hung up without another word, my mind racing. Josh's call didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't shake the unease it left behind. Something about his tone, his insistence, made me wonder if Emily really was okay. Against my better judgment, I decided to go back to the house. The drive felt longer than it should have, every red light and slow-moving car stretching my nerves thin. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my heart was pounding. The house was dark, except for a faint glow coming from the living room. I let myself in, the familiar creak of the front door sounding louder than usual in the stillness. Emily, I called out, my voice echoing through the empty space. No response. I walked into the living room and found her sitting on the couch, a nearly empty bottle of wine on the coffee table in front of her. She didn't look up when I entered. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. Emily, I said again, softer this time. She blinked, as if snapping out of a trance, and looked at me. For the first time in weeks, there was no defiance in her expression, just raw, unfiltered pain. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice hoarse. Josh called me, I said, sitting down in the armchair across from her. He said you were upset. She let out a bitter laugh. Of course he did. Can't even let me have my breakdown in peace. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees. What's going on, Emily? What's this about? She stared at the wine bottle for a long moment before speaking. I went to see him today. I don't know what I thought, but when I saw him, I realized something. What? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. That I don't love him, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I never did. It was just easy and exciting and stupid. I didn't respond, letting her words sink in. But it wasn't real, she continued, her voice breaking. None of it was. And now I've ruined everything. Her words should have brought me some sense of relief, but instead, they filled me with a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I don't know what else to do, she admitted, burying her face in her hands. I messed up, Ryan. I hurt you, and I don't know how to fix it. Her vulnerability caught me off guard, but I didn't let it sway me. You had plenty of chances to fix it before, I said, my voice firm. Why should I believe you now? She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Because I mean it. I don't want to lose you. Not like this. The room was heavy with silence as I struggled to process everything. Emily was finally admitting her mistakes, finally saying the words I needed to hear. But it didn't feel like enough. Not yet. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice raw. I don't expect you to, she said. I need you to know that I'm sorry. Her words hung in the air, fragile and uncertain. As I sat there, torn between the life we'd built and the wreckage she'd left behind. Her apology hung in the air, thin and frail, like it might shatter if either of us breathed too hard. I wanted to feel something, anything, but all I could muster was exhaustion. Emily, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was now a stranger sitting in my living room, pleading for something she couldn't name. "You're sorry," I said finally, my voice cold. "But sorry doesn't erase 6 months of lies. It doesn't erase the fact that you chose him over me." Her face crumpled, but I pressed on. "You don't just get to say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to the way it was. That's not how this works." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. Please, Ryan, I can't lose you." The desperation in her voice might have moved me once, but now it just felt hollow. "You should have thought of that before," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "Before you went to him. Before you turned our marriage into a joke." She flinched, her hands gripping the edge of the couch cushion like it was the only thing grounding her. "I didn't think it would get this far," she whispered. "I didn't think I'd lose control." "Lose control?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "You made a choice, Emily. Over and over again. Every time you texted him, every time you met him, every time you went behind my back, you chose him." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I didn't choose him. I was running away from you, from us. I didn't know how to fix what was broken." I stood, pacing the room, my emotions threatening to boil over. "And instead of talking to me, instead of trying, you ran straight into someone else's arms. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To know that you weren't just lying to me. You were laughing, smiling, living a whole other life while I sat here, wondering why you'd pulled away." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't stop. "You humiliated me, Emily. You turned me into a fool, and you didn't even care. You didn't stop to think about the damage you were doing because you were too busy chasing whatever thrill he gave you." "I do care," she cried, standing abruptly. "I care more than you know. I was selfish and I was wrong, but I care, Ryan. I care about us, about you. That's why I'm here, trying to fix this." "Fix it?" I turned to face her, my voice breaking. "You can't fix this, Emily. Not with words. Not with apologies. The damage is done." She sank back into the couch, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed into her hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered Josh's call. His words. She wasn't herself. "Why did you go to him today?" I asked suddenly, my voice steady but icy. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face etched with guilt. I don't know," she stammered. I thought if I saw him, it would help me understand why I did what I did." "And did it?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, it made me realize that it wasn't about him. It was never about him. It was about me, about feeling something, anything, because I was too afraid to face what I'd done to us." Her admission was raw, but it didn't feel like enough. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall as I looked down at her. "So what now? What do you want from me, Emily? Because I can't keep doing this." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "I want another chance," she said. "I want to prove to you that I can be better, that I can fix this. Please, Ryan, just one chance. That's all I'm asking for." I let out a long breath, my chest tight with the weight of her words. "One chance?" I said slowly, testing the words. "Do you even understand what you're asking for? This isn't something you can just patch up with promises. This is everything, Emily. Everything we built, everything we shared, it's all broken. And I don't know if it can ever be whole again. I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice trembling. "Therapy, counseling, anything. I'll quit my job if I have to. Just tell me what to do." I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of the woman I used to love. The woman who would have never let it come to this. And for the first time, I realized I didn't know if she was still in there. "You want one chance?" I said finally, my voice steady. "Fine. But here's the deal. You end things with him. Completely. No more texts. No more calls. No more closure meetings. You cut him out of your life entirely." "I already have," she said quickly, her voice laced with desperation. "Good," I said, my tone firm. "Because if I even get a hint that he's still in the picture, we're done. No second chances. No explanations. Just done." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. And we go to therapy," I continued, "together and separately. You need to figure out why you did this, and I need to figure out if I can ever trust you again. I'll do it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is your one chance, Emily, I said, my chest aching with every word. Don't waste it. Her sobs filled the silence as I walked upstairs, leaving her alone with her guilt. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't reconciliation. This was a trial, and only time would tell if she deserved the second chance she'd begged for. 9 years. That's how long it's been since that night. Since Emily begged for another chance, and I gave her one. Some might call it a leap of faith. Others would call it stupidity. There were days when I didn't know which one it was. We went to therapy like I said we would. Weekly sessions that started with uncomfortable silences and passive-aggressive barbs but eventually grew into something resembling progress. For a long time, I couldn't look at her without replaying everything in my mind. The emails, the video, her face when she chose time instead of me. But slowly, things changed. She quit her job, something I hadn't even asked her to do. She said it was part of her commitment to rebuilding our trust. She started showing up in ways she hadn't for years. Small things at first, like leaving handwritten notes on the fridge or planning date nights. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were fights, big ones, where I'd accuse her of not trying hard enough or bring up Josh's name just to watch her squirm. She took it, every ounce of my anger, like she thought it was her penance. But somewhere along the way, the anger faded. Or maybe I just got tired of carrying it. Then, 9 years later, just when I thought we were finally in a place of stability, it all came crashing down. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. I was at work, buried in paperwork, when I saw her name on the screen. Emily? I answered, confused. She rarely called me during the day. Her voice was shaky, almost frantic. Ryan, I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else. My stomach dropped. What's going on? She hesitated. And in that pause, I felt every wound from 9 years ago reopen. I ran into Josh, she said finally. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Where? I asked, my voice cold. At the grocery store, she said quickly. It wasn't planned, I swear. I didn't even know he lived in town again. He approached me. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of my desk. And what did he want? He told me he's been on TV, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. Apparently, he's hosting some national morning show now. He's famous, Ryan. And he what? I snapped, my patience unraveling. He asked me to meet him, she admitted, her voice barely audible. He said he wanted to catch up, to apologize for everything. Please tell me you said no, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. I didn't say anything, she said, her voice cracking. I left, but Ryan, he called me after. He found my number somehow, and he called me. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Why are you telling me this now, Emily? Because I didn't answer, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. And I wanted you to hear it from me before anyone else. Her attempt at transparency felt like a cruel joke. Before anyone else? I repeated, my voice icy. What does that even mean? She hesitated again, and this time, I could hear the guilt seeping into her voice. Because he mentioned us on air, she said finally. He told some story about an old flame and how he almost had a chance at happiness but lost it. People might figure it out. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The idea of Josh, dragging my life into the spotlight felt like the ultimate betrayal, even years after I thought I'd buried it. And you didn't think to tell me about this the second it happened? I demanded, my voice rising. I was scared, she cried. I didn't want to hurt you again. I didn't know what to do. The words felt hollow. All I could think about was how fragile the trust we'd rebuilt had always been, and how easily it could crumble under the weight of one man's ego. Ryan, I promise you, she said, her voice desperate now. I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't spoken to him, and I never will. I didn't know how to handle this. I sat there, silent, my mind racing. For 9 years, I'd thought we'd moved past this. I thought I'd forgiven her. But in that moment, I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Do you love me, Emily? I asked suddenly, my voice quieter now. Of course I do, she said without hesitation. I've spent the last 9 years trying to prove that to you. And yet, here we are, I said, my voice heavy. Please don't do this, she begged. Please don't let him ruin us again. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Emily, I don't know if I can keep living like this, waiting for the next time the past comes back to haunt us. I'm tired. Tears filled her voice. Ryan, I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do. For the first time in 9 years, I didn't have an answer. I need time, I said finally, throwing her own words back at her. Her sobs on the other end of the line were the last thing I heard before I hung up. 9 years later, I realized the truth. Some cracks never fully heal.